Hi, Craig. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Sherry. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. It's kind of been a long time coming. Let's get nuts and have some fun.
I'm so happy you're here because I think the first time I heard you speak was on Kathy Heller's show, and you were talking about reinventing yourself, and actually something that you've done over the recent years. So you've reinvented yourself around your business, and then you went from not being a runner to completing multiple marathons in 1 year. And for many people, how do they even get that place where they overcome that fear, where they step into their purpose? And so this is something that I want to talk about today and hope that you can share your insight around. But maybe before we get into that, you could share a little bit about your story.
Yeah. First of all, I'm glad to be here. I'm excited. Love your energy as well. A little background on me. I was on Wall Street for 13 years, made a lot of money, which at that point in my life, I associated with success. As life will teach you, making money doesn't necessarily equal success. I found myself a little burnt out a couple years back. I got out of a toxic relationship. My dad, my best friend in the world, had got diagnosed with cancer. And straight up, I wasn't having any fun. I found myself in a real dark season. I was unfulfilled and unhappy. I was looking to find myself. I believe we're all here for a specific reason, with an assignment, with gifts, but I felt stuck. I found running, or did running find me? I'll never know for sure, but it was pretty divine. I'd always been a weightlifter and so forth, and never really ran, if I'm being honest. I fell in love with the sport. As soon as I found it, signed up for 4 marathons that first year, and I've run six since. And we just PR'd in Chicago a couple months back. But I wasn't looking to become a professional runner, Sherry. I was just looking for an outlet, an arena to be a gladiator in. Just looking to find myself, gain some confidence again. Fast forward the pandemic, bang, talk about a global awakening.
Big
I
time.
looked around, I saw a lot of Netflix, a lot of day drink, and I said, that's not going to be me. If there was ever a moment to reassess, this is it. And so I made myself available for those Crib Divine downloads. And bang, it started to come to me. It was like, of course, I've always been obsessed with personal development, but what if it was more than a passion? What if it was a purpose? And then I said, all right, we're on to something. What are my gifts? Everybody's got them. And I humbly say, I have an ability to communicate pretty effectively. So
Hmm.
I married those two concepts. I didn't want to be the next Tony Robbins. I want to be the first Craig Siegel. You never know how something like this will turn out, but I knew this. The thought of going back after lockdown to my business, I started to associate with death. That's how unhappy I was. So, although there was no guarantee that CLS would work, Cultivate Lasting Symphony, or a play of my initials, Craig Landon Siegel, there was no guarantee. I knew that there was no choice but to see and explore what was out there. I felt called to it. So I did. And the rest is history. Over the last 2 years, the brand has exploded. We have one of the top business entrepreneurial podcasts on the planet, sponsored by Mark Cuban, speaking all over the world. We were just in Portugal in front of 70,000, just handed in the manuscript for a lucrative book deal, community membership, coaching, all of that. Sold the business on Wall Street, and this is it for me in some capacity. And we're just getting warmed up. And you mentioned reinvention, did two things there, right? Went from lifting weights to running marathons. And then I reinvented my whole identity in the pandemic, and I've never been happier.
Wow, that's so intense and so much to unpack there. And
Yep.
as you're talking about purpose, I'm sure a lot of people are listening and they're saying, "Well, I know my what, I know what I want to do in my life. I have my why, but I'm so stuck on the how." And I think for most of us, we get caught up on all the small details of how it's going to happen. And just you doing that massive transition, I mean, you reinvented essentially your entire business. How do you overcome that fear? Because there's these constant limiting beliefs telling you that you can't. There's this whole concept around imposter syndrome. You've never done this before. You didn't have experience around this. How did you set your mind and gain clarity on how to exactly do that?
Two things, and it's a phenomenal question, and this is really tangible for your listeners and for the audience. First and foremost, the power of the second thought, meaning thoughts are random, thinking is not. So although it's backed by science that most of the thoughts we get over the course of the day are negative, but here's the beauty of it: thoughts are not facts. So as soon as we're feeling unworthy, like I did for a moment before I started CLS, and believe it or not, I'm an introvert, which surprises people. At the time, I had 300 Instagram followers, which you can argue is less than zero. So I felt those thoughts. Then I realized, hold on a second. What's a second thought? What's a different thought that I could choose right now? I have been successful in different fields and industries and sports and athletics and so forth. I do have a story to tell. I can communicate very effectively. I am resourceful and determined enough to make this work. And so I chose that second thought. So anyone that's listening right now that's like, oh, that all sounds great, but I'm scared, but I feel fear. Choose a different, more empowering and productive thought. That'll create a new belief and a whole new frequency. And the second thing I'll say is this: sometimes just the fear of staying where you are can be so great that the scary action of taking a little bit of progress into the unknown can actually be liberating.
Wow. As you're saying that, I resonate with everything. Like every single cell of my being is responding because I actually have a story too of having to reinvent myself. When I was 16, I was hit by a car. I was a child athlete at that time, and I was told I would never play sports again. I've actually gone to have surgery on my back twice. And of course, there's this physical pain that you're constantly dealing with. You're on medication. You're listening to all of these doctors' advices, and ultimately it's what you said earlier. It's this not being able to live in this space anymore, that where I currently am is not ever who I imagined I would be. And so it took a lot of courage to first get started, to put myself in that right environment that would support my success. But ultimately it was really really deciding, and I think that's really where it comes from, that decision and that desire that you no longer are okay with that current situation.
Yeah, hell yeah. And sometimes like people like they thought like, look, yes, it takes courage to try something new, but sometimes you just get to a point where the cost of inaction, the COI, as I like to say, is way too high. And that relieves some of the pressure from what might happen. And instead of thinking about what can go wrong, which sadly most people do, you start to think about, well, what can go right? And then it becomes exciting.
Mm, right. Yeah. And I think that's really the key here: excitement, energy. And it's very clear that you have this high energy. Like I feel it just as we're talking. And I actually think that that's where it's at, right? Is learning to manage your energy is and learning to manage your state essentially is what drives success. Because if you think about it, when you're in a great mood, when something amazing happened to you, it's so easy to put on your shoes and go for a run. But when you're having that hard day, something really bad happened in business, or you're fighting with your spouse, putting on your running shoes then becomes more of a hurdle, right? So how do you manage your state, Craig? How do you keep yourself at that high energy?
Yeah, so everyone's always like, what are you on right now? But here's the thing, if I'm being 100% transparent with you, I spent a very good amount of time being unhappy and miserable, right? So now I love this stuff. I finally found what sets my soul on fire, right? Like talking to you right now, like this isn't work to me. I'm glad to connect with you. You're doing great things. I hope that we share some nuggets that the audience can take and then apply. I genuinely love this stuff. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why it's been so successful. Look, you got to find what you love in life. I know that because I have contrast. And it doesn't, you couldn't pay me $1 billion to go back and be miserable doing what I was doing. You just can't. What's the price of peace,
Mm,
right? And so, and ultimately, ironically, I'm making more money now than I made on Wall Street. Why? Because I'm operating with my heart, from my soul, and the money is just an energetic exchange. So bottom line is I absolutely love this stuff. I can't get enough of it. It's not work to me. I generally want to help people. And if you and I say one thing and someone listening shows up a little bit different, or they breathe different oxygen because you and I showed up, that's everything to me. So look, are there days when I wake up and maybe I'm a little bit more tired than usual? Of course, I'm human, or so I think. But then I go back to, okay, why am I feeling like this? What can I do about it? And then I transform from reactive to proactive. And I start implementing positive thoughts, which create those new beliefs and then ultimately new actions and behaviors. And at the end of the day, look, standards over feelings. Even on the days that you don't feel like it, you revert back to your standards. And from interviewing some of the world's greats, professional athletes, Hollywood actors, entrepreneurs, everything, a common denominator that I see is that those greats operate from their standards. In other words, they get going even on the days they don't feel like it.
yeah, and I think that's where consistency comes in, and it's so important to just pinpoint really what consistency is all about. And I think again it comes down to that point of managing your energy and learning how to show up, learning how to be adaptable, learning how to be flexible, especially when it seems like it's the hardest. And I always tell my athletes, your best workouts are the ones that were the hardest to show up for.
Yeah, hell yeah. It's always like that. The biggest growth is on the other side of pain, right? Or uncomfortable action, if you will.
Yeah. And I love also that you share that, because somebody listening to you or listening to this conversation is like, well, he's got it all together. He's so lucky. He's so positive. Things probably happen so easily for him. And I bet that you have to work on this on a daily basis. It's something that is like brushing your teeth, right? It's like mowing your lawn. You don't just do it once. It's this constant auditing of the thoughts in your mind and constantly managing your state.
I'm so glad you said that. What an awesome point, right? And for the audience listening, like if you want to look good or achieve certain fitness goals, you got to stay
Right.
physically fit, right? But what's overlooked is staying mentally fit. And that's just a non-negotiable for me every single day. And the irony is I was doing this for 15 years anyway. I just didn't think it would be my calling and my life. I just did it for myself. But ultimately, staying mentally fit is everything because as human beings, we constantly get plagued with negativity, whether it be society, the economy, an interaction, just thoughts, science. So you have to stay ahead of the game by constantly being aware of that and then having strategies to block out the interference. So you nailed it. I'm working on myself every single day, non-negotiable.
Right. Yeah. And I talk often about diet not just being what we're eating, right? We're always focusing on diet just being the food that we're eating that's giving us energy, but it's also what we're watching on TV. It's the news that's constantly negative. It's the environments that we're sitting down in, the conversations that we're sitting down in. It's the constant absorption of fear in our environment that is also part of our diet. It's even our own breath. And so when we start to look at diet in this way and learn how essentially whatever we input in our body is going to impact that energy and that frequency that's going to attract everything around us, we start to see every single small interaction in our day in a very different way.
That's awesome. I never heard that articulated like that. Almost like a mental diet or a mindset diet. That's really powerful.
Yeah. Well, what did you do, let's say, when you started, every time you reinvented? I'm sure you found yourself having to weed out certain people from your life, all those energy vampires, right? There was for sure a lot of remodeling going on.
Yeah, it's funny. I dropped a solo episode on our podcast, the CLS Experience today, called Setting Boundaries. And this is exactly what I was talking about. Look, if you want to perform at an elite level in anything, relationships, business, career, fitness, you have to protect your energy,
Mm.
right? Like I stay in a bubble of serenity. I'm going to be honest, I don't even know some of the stuff that's going on in the news, which, might be controversial, but every time you turn on the news, it's usually negative. So I'm
Right.
up to date, but like, I'm so strategic and selective with who I allow in my orbit or in my world now. And let me be honest, like as I reinvented myself, not just my career with CLS, but I really reinvented my life. I don't have much in common with a lot of people from my past. And I don't want to say outgrown them because maybe that doesn't sound right because they have a choice to grow too, but I'm just on a different frequency. Right. And now anyone that like bothers me or lowers my state, like, look, if I'm interacting with someone or something and I find myself in a lowered state as a result, I have the choice to make. Do I want to repeat that? Probably not.
Mm.
Right. So I am so selective with everything and anyone that I consume. And by doing so, that's one of the reasons why I'm able to stay in this frequency longer than most people can.
Right. Yeah. And as you're saying that, it's just bringing up something for me, and it's that sense of responsibility that we all have for our own growth. And sometimes as we are starting to create transformation in our life, and I see this all the time around health and fitness, people deciding that they're going to start making changes around their lifestyle, they start to do that, but then the people around them are not coming with them, or they're trying to pull them down, right? Stay with me on the couch and let's watch a movie. Let's go grab a pizza while, you're trying to go to the gym. And so I think it becomes really important that we have to make the decision for ourselves. And the only way that we truly can influence and impact people around us is by doing. It's not by telling them what to do, because people ultimately don't do what we say, right? They do what we do. And it's through the actions and through just us in that state of being that ends up influencing everyone around us.
I think that's so good. And I want to acknowledge you for that. That whole mental diet thing, mindset diet, that's beautiful stuff. And that's what it takes, call it setting boundaries, a mental diet, whatever you want to call it. You have to be so proactive and strategic and intentional with anything and anyone that you allow in that bubble of serenity. So I think that's such an important topic.
Yeah, yeah. And around sort of that mental strengthening, I just want to come back to what you were saying earlier about how you went from running just a couple kilometers to signing up to 4 marathons in 1 year. Okay, like who does that? First, I want to know your why. Like what inspired you? Like how do you go from running, being the gym rat and running a couple kilometers to suddenly deciding that marathon is for you?
Yeah, I was just writing about this in my book. We just handed the manuscript. And one of the cool things about writing a book is it brings you back, right? And like you like unpack some things that maybe you forgot about. And I was trying to dive in and unpack why I did that. And the truth of the matter is when I was in that dark season of life, I think divine, God put running in my life so that I can begin to create an arena to be a gladiator in, to develop confidence, to prove to myself that I could do hard things and I could persevere and I could be pretty damn good at it too. And so, and I also have an addictive personality, which I think is an asset as long as they're healthy obsessions. So I just became so fascinated with how mental running was. And I'm going to say this for anyone out there that is physically able to put one foot in front of the other, I think anybody can run,
Yes.
right? But it's that voice in your head, just like life, that you have to combat. It's that interference that you have to set up systems to block out. And I'm just so fascinated by the sport. And so I ran a 5K, I ran a 10K, and I was like, let's just do a marathon.
Why
And
not?
yeah, I signed up for New York City. And here's something interesting. Finished New York City, a lot of family and friends there cheering me on. And I ran that marathon and I crossed the finish line with a 4:12. I had never run that
Damn.
distance before.
Good job.
And I remember immediately crossing the finish line and being disappointed. And I'm like, 4:12. I know I could break four, right? Because I had felt things in my body that I'd never felt before. And so after that, I just became determined to break that illusory 4 hour benchmark. And so I ran another one, and then in San Fran, I ran 3:53, and then in Philly ran 3:39, and then just now in Chicago, I ran a 3:31. But the lesson
Wow.
there is it wasn't that I got so much faster. It's just that I only wanted to break four. And as a result, I was right around there. Then I realized that the four number is just it's imaginary limitation. And
Yes.
now I just ran to 3:31. So I love running because of how mental it is. I think it's beautiful. It's pure. I speak to God when I run. It's like a moving meditation for me. And I just love the fact that, in my opinion, it's 90% mental.
Yeah, 100%. And I've done an Ironman too. I did that in 2016, and I've always said, and by the way, the
Oh,
first time the first time I did my marathon was in the Ironman, and I figured it's going to be one foot in front of the other, just don't stop. And let me tell you, just crossing that finish line was the most amazing moment in my life. I've had two babies, but crossing that
oh,
finish line was the most amazing moment. And so
wow.
congratulations for 4 in 1 year. That's super badass. And
Thank
as
you.
people are listening, I'm sure they're like, okay, well, how is he doing this? How does he sign up for 4 marathons suddenly? And, he's running a successful business. He's reinventing himself. He's, got the #1 podcast. So all these amazing things are happening. And now how are you managing your life? And, I think you mentioned also something about being in a relationship. I remember hearing about that. And I think you recently got engaged. So how do you manage all of these different areas of your life and you still have this beautiful energy? You're not burning yourself out. You're able to still continue to manage your state.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. I receive all of that. It's true. I have a lot going on. I mean, all day it's something different. I just got engaged also, which is super exciting. Look, I love this stuff. I spent a long time trying to find myself, and now that I did, like, I'm getting everything I ever asked for, anything I could ever dream of, and we're growing rapidly, and we're helping a lot of people. So this is my mission. This is my call, and this is my assignment. I can't get enough of it. Look, to be straight up, like running, I don't do anything half-assed, as I imagine you could tell. I don't think you do either. Do a thing, do it well.
Right.
So after running Chicago in October, after that, I stopped running for a minute. When I say a minute, like a month, I just I just needed a mental break from that because running I'm committed to, but CLS I'm all in on. And
Mm,
there's a difference, right? So when you're all in, like you'll stop at nothing to make this thing successful. The running takes a lot out of you. It does. And CLS is only getting busier. So look, I ran today. Obviously, I'm running, but I'm not training for a marathon right now, although that can change. You have to be able to delegate something that I'm honestly working through and trying to figure out. We're hiring and we're scaling now, so we're hiring a staff, which is taking things off my plate so I can focus on my zone of genius and so forth. But I'd love to give you a sexy answer and just say that, it's easy. It's not.
mm,
But if it was easy, anybody would do it. Right. So we have a lot going on, but they are all blessings. And I'm navigating it.
mm. So what you're describing to me is effortless effort, right? You're in the effort, and I think it's really important to pinpoint. By the way, even though it's so clear, you're so lit up by what you're talking about. It's work. You're still putting in the work. You're putting in the time. So that's definitely something to be expected. But the way you say it is with such certainty. And the way you speak is with such certainty, and the way you talk about how you're going to get stuff done, it's like it's going to happen no matter what. And I'm super curious as to where did that come from? Have you always been like this, or was there that pivotal moment in your life where you suddenly just became so knowing of what you're going to create?
In regards to confidence, the beauty of it is it's a skill set that anybody can develop, right? There are strategies and tactics. When I first started studying personal development, when I got to Wall Street and I started to become aware of like ET and Tony Robbins and all these people, and now most of them have been on the show and they're my friends, which is really surreal and cool. But I was just so fascinated with that. Like you can develop confidence. Like I used to be shy to even approach a pretty girl,
Hmm.
right? And now people think that, I'm super outgoing and all that stuff. And it's true. I've become very comfortable in front of the camera, on stage, in front of 70,000 and all that stuff. But first of all, you gain confidence with experience, right? But ultimately, that shouldn't stop anybody from getting started. Look, just have faith that you're resourceful, that you believe in yourself. I think that's a superpower. And put in the reps, right? And ultimately, if you've been good somewhere else, you can be great anywhere else, in my opinion. Like what made me successful in Wall Street wasn't Wall Street, it was Craig. And when I realized that, I started breaking 4 hours in marathons. And when I realized that, I started CLS in an industry that I had no experience in. So I think success comes down to characteristics of a person, and it also has to do with confidence. And it's a mindset,
Mhm.
right? Like you're resourceful enough, you'll figure it out. You are worthy, you are capable, you've done great things, you can do hard things, and you just carry that momentum and energy into anything. And then obviously you combine that with experience, you will develop confidence.
I love that. Yeah, how you do anything is how you do everything, and I think that's absolutely true. And you develop this skill set around how you want to handle things or how you look at things. Is this happening for me or is this happening to me? Right? Do I have to do this or do I get to do this? And it's those small shifts, even in just words and language, that completely change our mindset around really that ultimate purpose and that drive that we essentially all have within us.
Yeah, hell yeah, absolutely.
So what does your day look like, Craig? So if let's say, give us like a rundown of what your typical day would look like.
Yeah, so each day is a little bit different, but there are certain consistencies. For example, I wake up at 4. I'm doing a little bit of meditation. I'm praying. Um, I'm journaling. I'm setting my conquer list for the day. I'm consuming something positive before I ever check emails or go on social media, whether it's an audio book or a podcast or something like that. Then I work out. Non-negotiable 7 days a week. And it's not so much for the physical component as it used to be. Now it's just for the mental component. And start the day off, get an edge. You're already head of the world, so to speak. Healthy competition, of course. And then from there, it depends on the day. It's either coaching calls, my community calls, a speaking engagement, a virtual speaking engagement. Often we're traveling. I'm working on a project. I'm filming a podcast. I'm a guest on a podcast. It's a little crazy, but I love it. I wouldn't change a thing. But it's jam packed all day. And at nighttime, I'm tired. But let me just be clear. I'm tired from a long day. I'm not depleted. When you're depleted, it's because you're burnt out and you're not in alignment. And I know that because I used to be that way. So I'm tired. I sleep like a baby and I can't wait to get up and do it all over again.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And I so appreciate your time today. And I want to honor your time today. And so, just as a final question for you, is there anything else that you want to share, maybe with our audience, that you haven't had a chance to yet? Any last words of insight?
I think reinvention is applicable for anybody in any season of life. It doesn't have to be a career. It could be an identity, anything. And reinvention is ready when you are, when you begin to believe that you are here for a reason, and then you're committed to being available and taking uncomfortable action. And I want everybody to know that.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Craig. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.